They called it honor. But what they did to their enemies was anything but human. This is the Viking blood eagle, the most horrifying execution ever recorded. Picture the late 9th century. The North Sea is a highway of terror and conquest. From the icy fjords of Scandinavia, long ships carved with dragon heads slice through the waves, carrying warriors who fear no death. These are the Vikings, a people defined by their gods, their steel, and their unyielding pursuit of glory. For them, life was a battle, and death was a gateway. To die with a sword in your hand was to earn a seat in Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, where they would feast and fight for eternity. But to die a coward, or worse, a traitor, was to be cast into the shadows, forgotten by the gods and men. This belief didn't just shape how they lived, it shaped how they punished. In this world of brutal honor, there was one punishment reserved for the most hated of enemies. For those who had committed the ultimate sin against a Viking chieftain, patricide, it was a sentence whispered in sagas and chronicles. A ritual so gruesome it blurred the line between justice and monstrous theater. It was called the BLRN, the Blood Eagle. This was not a swift death. It was a ceremony of vengeance. A spectacle designed to carve a message of power into the very flesh of their foe. It was reserved for kings and chieftains who had betrayed or murdered a Viking lord, ensuring their end would be as infamous as their crime. Imagine a captive, stripped bare and forced to his knees before a hushed, vengeful crowd. The air is thick with the smell of salt, pine, and nervous sweat. There are no cheers, only a chilling, expectant silence. The ritual begins, not with a blade to the throat, but to the back. First, the executioner would use a sharp knife to carve the outline of an eagle with outstretched wings deep into the skin of the victim's back, from the shoulders down to the waist. The initial shock of the cold steel would be followed by a searing pain that was only the prelude to the true horror. This was a slow, deliberate process, each slice a testament to the crime committed. With the flesh laid open, the real work started. The executioner would take a heavy axe or a broad-bladed sword and, with precise, powerful blows, sever each rib from the spine. You would hear the sickening crack of bone, one after another, as the ribcage was broken and pried open from the inside. The crowd would watch, unblinking, as the executioner reached into the cavity. The victim, still alive, would feel hands inside his own body, pulling and tearing. The ribs would be bent outwards, twisted to form a pair of grotesque, bloody wings that jutted from the man's back. The sound would be of wet tearing and the ragged, desperate gasps of the victim. But the final act was the most monstrous. The executioner would reach back inside the now exposed chest cavity, locate the still breathing lungs, and pull them out. The lungs, glistening and pink, would be laid over the wings of the broken ribs. In the cold Nordic air, as the victim took his final, agonizing breaths, the lungs would quiver and flutter, mimicking the gentle movement of an eagle's wings. This was the saline stimulant, as the sagas called it, the final, agonizing spasm that marked the end. The victim would be conscious for much of it, dying from shock, blood loss, and suffocation in a symphony of unimaginable pain. Was this just a story, a terrifying piece of Viking propaganda? The sagas say no. They point to real men who allegedly met this fate. One was King Glar of Northumbria. In 865 AD, he captured and executed the legendary Viking hero Ragnar Lothbrok by casting him into a pit of vipers. Ragnar's sons, Ivar the Boneless and Ubba, swore revenge. They led the great heathen army, invaded England, and in 867 AD, they captured King Gley. The Norse sagas claim they subjected him to the blood eagle, a father's death avenged in the most brutal way imaginable. Another account mentions Halfdan, son of King Haraldr Fairhair of Norway, suffering the same fate at the hands of his enemies. These weren't just random acts of violence. They were recorded as historical punishments for specific, heinous crimes. To us, this is the work of monsters. But to the Vikings, it was something else entirely. It was honor. For the victim, there was a sliver of redemption to be found in the agony. The ultimate test of a warrior's mettle was to endure the blood eagle without crying out. To remain silent, to face the excruciating pain with stoic resolve, was to prove your courage one last time. It was a final, defiant act that could, in their eyes, cleanse the stain of your crime, and, perhaps, just perhaps, grant you entry into Valhalla after all. The silence was the real spectacle. The crowd wasn't listening for screams. They were listening for the lack of them. In this theater of cruelty, enduring pain was the highest form of honor. Listen closely. I have to tell you something. While these stories are etched into Viking lore, many modern historians believe the blood eagle was never real. They argue it was a literary invention, a misunderstanding of complex poetry. The graphic descriptions, they say, might have been born from generations of storytellers embellishing the tales, making their ancestors seem even more fearsome. The sagas that describe it were written down centuries after the Viking Age by Christian authors who may have been trying to paint the pagan Norsemen as savage barbarians. The archaeological record shows no evidence of it. No skeletons with ribs broken in such a specific, ritualistic way. So what was the truth? Was it a real, horrific ritual of justice, performed on the bodies of kings? Or was it a powerful myth, a terrifying ghost story passed down through the ages to scare enemies and glorify ancestors? The shock is not just in the brutality of the act itself, but in the chilling possibility that it was all a fabrication, a legend designed to build the very fear the Vikings thrived on. The fear in the eyes of their enemies was as valuable a weapon as any axe. After the supposed ritual, the message was clear to all who witnessed it or heard the tale. This is the price of crossing the sons of Odin. Fear was the true purpose. The debate rages on. Recorded in academic journals and historical texts, the Norse sagas, like the *Orkneyinga saga and the *Heimskringla*, stand as our primary, yet flawed, evidence. They paint a picture so vivid it feels real, yet so monstrous it begs to be fiction. We are left caught between the warrior poets who wrote of bloody wings and the modern scholars who see only metaphor and propaganda. The blood eagle remains a dark stain on the history of the Northmen, a symbol of their terrifying reputation. We may never know for certain if a man's lungs ever fluttered on his own back in the cold English air, but the legend itself tells us everything we need to know about the Viking world. A world where honor was forged in pain and fear was the ultimate currency. But the Vikings had other rituals, ones not for their enemies, but for themselves. What happened when one of their own died, not in battle, but in bed? And what did they do to the woman who chose to follow him into the afterlife? That is a story for next time.